family betrayed me in court for my son's custody. Now they beg for help after my ex turned on them. I secretly recorded their confession. Hello, so this is going to be a little long because I need to include a lot of context for it to make sense. I, 33F, got divorced a few months ago, but it had been planned for over a year. I met my ex-husband James through friends when I was 25, and after 2 years of dating, we decided to live together and marry. His family was quite conservative and traditional, and they did not approve of live-in relationships, so we had to marry if we wanted to be together. I genuinely liked James, so I didn't mind marrying him. My parents supported our decision, so we married. Within a year of living together, I discovered that I was pregnant, and we were ecstatic. It seemed like our family was finally coming together, and everything was falling into place. Unfortunately, after I revealed my pregnancy, my in-laws began pressing me to quit my career and focus on being a mother. It didn't help that my job was not very generous about maternity leave, and because I hadn't been there long, my leave would be especially brief. So at the time, I considered the advantages and cons and decided to leave my work. I didn't make this decision alone. James and his parents were convincing me it would be the greatest decision in the long term, so I just had to do it. James appeared assured and promised to take care of the family. I didn't have to worry about money. He'd bring enough. My sole attention would be on raising our child. My parents and older brother both agreed it was best if I stopped my job and stayed at home, like my mother had done. She elected not to return to work because family was her top concern. With pressure from both sides of the family, I chose to quit. During my second trimester, everything appeared to be in order, and I had complete faith in my husband to not let me down, so I quit my booming career. However, shortly after my kid was born, I observed something peculiar about James's behavior throughout the latter months of my pregnancy. I couldn't put my finger on it, but his vibe felt odd. Sure, he seemed joyful when our baby was born, and I expected things to return to normal, but unfortunately, they worsened. He got angry around me, and if I tried to speak with him, he snapped. He only seemed genuinely happy when he was playing our son. Aside from that, it seemed like he was constantly annoyed to be at home with me. He started working longer hours, and even on weekends, he made excuses not to spend time with me. I didn't understand what was wrong, but I kept trying to make our marriage work. Unlike him, I still loved him and refused to give up on us. This pattern persisted for around 2 years following my son's birth. James stayed at work longer than required, and even when he came home, he wasn't truly with me. I couldn't really complain since whenever I tried to talk to him, he said he was too exhausted from work, and it was not an easy chore for him to be the sole breadwinner for the household, which was really disrespectful to me because I was perfectly capable of earning money for myself. But I had to rely on him since he promised to make things easy for me. I even asked him a few times if he would rather that I return to work so that we could split the bills and he didn't have to face all of the pressure. However, he claimed that would be an insult to him and his abilities, and that his parents would never accept. We'd have a difficult time with them if I went back to work. So I stayed at home and raised my son, which was the only thing that made me happy, because James had changed. He was no longer the man I'd married. About a year ago, I discovered that James had an affair with one of his coworkers. It was quite difficult for me to find this, because I had been skeptical for quite some time. I even snooped his phone and laptop while he was sleeping and discovered nothing. I knew all of his passwords because he had written them down in his notepad, but that didn't help. It almost seemed as if he had nothing to conceal, and I began to feel dumb for being cautious. I even searched through his possessions for a burner phone or anything odd, but I found nothing. I began to suspect that I was being overly paranoid and insecure, but as luck would have it, I witnessed his cheating firsthand. About a year ago, James and I were organizing a spectacular birthday celebration for our son. He'd invited the coworker he was fooling with. She was a single mother with a youngster around our age, so I wasn't surprised she got invited. James had informed me she was a very close friend, so I saw nothing wrong with her being there. After my son had cut his birthday cake, I went upstairs to change into more comfortable attire for the celebration. When I got into my bedroom, I saw James and his coworker making out. She was seated on his lap. It took me a few minutes to grasp what I saw. First and foremost, it was in my bedroom, which exacerbated the situation. Second, they did not even pause when they heard the door open. I had to walk up to them before they noticed I was there. I'm quite sure they felt it was great to make out in my bedroom, at home, just for the thrill of it, but they obviously did not anticipate me to have a complete breakdown. I'm not proud of it, but discovering that what I believed for so long was true, sparked something inside me. I grabbed the co-worker's hair and began dragging her out of the room. According to what I was later told, James is physically stronger than me, but he was unable to stop me. I can't recall much of it, since I had a rage blackout. I carried her downstairs, James following behind me, and tossed her in the center of the room when everyone was still present. I don't recall much of what I said, but I supposedly called her various disparaging names and informed everyone what she and James were up to in my bedroom. I didn't care if my kid or his pals were present. Looking back, that was really uncomfortable and inappropriate, but I didn't consider it at the time. I screamed at the top of my lungs. My parents, brother, and in-laws were all present. My father eventually calmed me down and returned me to my room. Once inside, I completely broke down and sobbed uncontrollably, but rather than staying with me to console me, my father locked me in my room and returned downstairs. I should have known then that my parents did not genuinely care about me. I knew they were more concerned with appearances than reality, but this was absurd. Nobody came to check on me over the following several hours. Even after I calmed down, I had no idea what was happening outside. I didn't have my phone, so I couldn't reach anyone. It wasn't until after midnight that my brother unlocked the door and allowed me out. He didn't even inquire how I was. They probably would have kept me in the room longer if I hadn't started banging on the door like a crazy lady. When I got out, I asked my brother what had transpired since I was locked in. He informed me that practically everyone had fled following my collapse. He also told me James had departed with his parents and our children. My parents, brother, and I were the only people left in the house. My brother let me out to discuss what we should do next, but in my family, discussion means telling me what to do. They informed me that I needed to apologize to everyone for how I had behaved at the party. Not only that, but I also needed to apologize to James and his parents. Apparently, James had difficulty convincing his co-worker not to file charges against me because what I did to her was technically an act of physical assault. My family told me that I owed it to James to speak things out and work on our marriage rather than making this a bigger deal. I lost it. I screamed at them to leave my house because I was not about to allow anyone stand under my roof and order me to apologize to my unfaithful spouse. I got into a heated argument with my family because they told me that I owed it to James to make things right and give the marriage another try, or they would sever ties with me. So I told them to go ahead since I had gotten to the point where I didn't care what anyone thought of me. I was going to file for divorce and get out of this situation without anyone's approval. I phoned a lawyer the next day and filed for divorce less than a week after the occurrence. James was served shortly after, and he had the arrogance to express disappointment and disbelief. He returned home the same day he was served with the divorce papers and demanded an explanation. I told him I was not going to take him back after what he had done and how he had disrespected me. We had a nasty verbal argument in which I called him a lot of names, and he promised me that I would never see my son again. I had no idea he would actually keep his word. Then the legal struggle started. We had very few common assets, so the divorce proceedings were far smoother than the custody battle. The house belonged to me because I bought it with my own money, and there was no doubt about that. Everything else, earnings divided between us. We only had to wait the 6-month waiting time mandated by the state, after which the divorce would be finalized if a settlement was made. The only disagreement was about alimony, because James forced me to quit my work and I didn't have enough money. I needed alimony to start anew. He, however, believed that I should not receive any alimony at all. Fortunately, I had a few texts that demonstrated he had promised to support me. Otherwise, I might not have received any. The divorce process was easier for me emotionally because I had already distanced mentally from James. However, it was the custody struggle that truly killed me. Unfortunately, my parents and brother stabbed me in the back for cash. My ex-husband and his lawyer were nasty, and they started building a case against me, painting me as an unstable, reckless, and insane mother. They wanted to show that I was unfit to raise our son alone, so James and his parents should gain full custody. I assumed my parents and brother had been bought off by my ex-in-laws because they were wealthy, and I couldn't think of another reason for my own family to turn against me. I'm very sure my family warmed up to my in-laws from the start because of their money. James accused me of being a functioning alcoholic with serious rage issues. They made up situations in which I allegedly lost my temper and endangered my son, even though none of this had actually occurred. They needed to portray me as the villain. I expected some people to side with me, but all of my friends supported James, which I believe was owing to my breakdown at my son's birthday party. The worst betrayal, however, occurred when my parents and brother testified against me in court, stating I needed rehab and intense therapy before being permitted to see my son. They even suggested that James cheated because he was tired of coping with my unpredictable behavior. Despite a good fight with my counsel, I was unable to win custody of my son. The odds were stacked against me, and there was little I could do to prevent the inevitable. My lawyer and I worked hard to gather proof to prove I was a decent mother, but it all went to waste. The decision was revealed a few months ago, and it was the last time I saw my kid in person. I was granted supervised visiting privileges, but James never let me see him. It was pointless. My son is now 4 years old, and I'm constantly concerned that he'll forget me. According to a few relatives that remain on my side, my family continues to see my son. They routinely publish images with him, but I can't see him. James and my son live with my in-laws, and it appears that everyone but me gets to spend time with him. I cannot imagine something more heartbreaking. I've been living on memories of my son, thinking James was taking excellent care of him. I don't think I could have provided a comfortable life for him on my current pay, given I've only lately resumed working. I got a job at a friend's startup, but it doesn't pay well. Most of the employees are in their early 20s, working for experience and expecting to advance to better chances. Although I receive alimony, it is insufficient to maintain my previous lifestyle. I can't cut expenditures like a bachelor, but it's all I have right now. I had wanted to reapply for joint custody once my life was in order, but an unexpected chance presented itself a few weeks ago. My parents contacted me after months of silence to ask for assistance. It turned out that James was not the fantastic man they thought he was. My brother sent me an email requesting that I come over to their place, since they had realized something crucial and wanted to come clean. They were tired of keeping secrets from me and wanted to be a part of my life again. I tried to ignore the email, but I couldn't quit thinking about how this might help me get my son back. So I went to their place that evening. I anticipated them to be living like kings after selling me out for money from my ex-in-laws. However, they were actually living in worse conditions than previously. My son, on the other hand, was overjoyed to see me, which added to an already wonderful evening. When I visited my family that day, they practically began pleading for forgiveness as soon as I walked in the door. Apparently, they recognized how severely they had messed up, and there was no turning back, yet they still wanted me to forgive them. After the divorce, when my ex-in-laws and James were approached about the money they had been promised, James informed my family that it was no longer occurring. Apparently, they had just been told that they would be well compensated if they turned on me and testified in their favor. However, there was no written evidence to support it. If my relatives tried to go back and inform me about everything, James and his family would make sure they never saw my son again. So, for the protection of my son, they agreed to keep their mouths hidden, even though they had not been paid. But things grew worse. They were not only pushed into testifying against me, but they were also treated as free babysitters. Every day, James would drop off our boy at my parents' house and they had to watch him while giving up their own time. It was really inconvenient because both my father and brother had jobs to attend to, and my mother couldn't handle all of the housework and caring for her grandchild on her own because she was getting older. So either my father or brother would have to work from home every day, which was growing increasingly tough for them, which is why they approached me to finally put an end to it. Apparently, they wanted to make a deal with me. They told me that if I provided them the money my ex-in-laws promised, they would represent me in court and ensure that I got custody of my son. I was going to recommend it myself, but it wasn't unexpected that they did. My family had always been materialistic, and this was especially true now that my father's business had failed and they were back to working for other people. Obviously they would money more than ever now, because my father wanted to retire but didn't have enough saved because he had invested all of his money in the firm, which eventually failed. They claimed they could make up a tale about how they were forced and coerced into testifying against me so they wouldn't be charged with perjury while under oath. They were unaware that I no longer required their assistance. I had been recording everything they said since the moment I came inside the house, since I suspected something was wrong and didn't want to take chances. So I had already recorded everything. Nonetheless, I encouraged my family to give me screenshots if they had any, to prove they had been used and lied to, and I promised to help them. Following that, I departed. I'd already seen my son, and I had more than enough evidence to seek custody again. So that's what I did the next day with my lawyer. This time, I was ready. The custody lawsuit is still ongoing, but one thing is certain. I will be able to prove that none of the accusations James made against me were accurate, and that my family had been lying about everything all along. I've already listened to the recording, which has greatly influenced my decision. James and his lawyer are literally rushing for evidence, while I take it all in and enjoy the show. This is what they made me go through the last time. And now I get to do it to them. It's karma at its best. And I couldn't be happier. The only thing that hasn't been ideal is that my family has said I used them, just like James did, and that I had no right to record them without their permission and use it against them. However, in my state, that is perfectly legal and acceptable in court. I had no idea what they were talking about until they told me I had broken their trust by recording them. Bold statements from those who broke my confidence by siding with my ex-husband in the custody dispute. They believed that what I did was wrong, because what they had done was out of necessity. They needed the money, but I didn't need to screw them over and expose them to perjury. They stated they had already committed to assist me and testify against James and his family, so I didn't need to go behind their backs. They keep contacting me, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to ignore. So am I a jerk for going over my family's back and putting them in danger of being charged with perjury? Update 1. Hello everyone. The custody dispute is still ongoing, and James and his lawyer are working tirelessly to show that they have been speaking the truth. Of course, they might be charged, and since it is a criminal, they could face jail time. But it is not my business right now, and it should not have been at any time. I'm not sure why I was worried about my parents when they obviously weren't concerned about me when it was my turn. So it's basically tit for tat right now. The comments section made me realize how entitled my parents were. Anyway, I've terminated connections with them. They can all go wherever they choose. I want my son to be okay and with me. I've waited long enough for this, and I'm not going to allow my family's victimization of themselves to stop me. If they can sell me out for money, I don't think I need to be loyal to them. I am done now. Update 2. So the good news is that I finally got in custody of my son. I don't think I've ever been this happy in my life. The second good news is that my in-laws, James and my family have been charged with, and they may face jail time. I'm sure they're regretting everything now, but I don't care since I got what I wanted, my son back, which was all I ever asked for. According to what I know, James is still attempting to fight it and avoid jail, but I don't think it will work. I've already applied for a restraining order against all of them because I've been receiving extremely frightening text messages, and I'm certain it's from these folks. Nobody else would want to hurt me unless it was them. Things have been really busy and crazy over the last several weeks, but I'm finally learning to slow down. I badly want to spend more time with my son, therefore I chose to shorten my working hours. I've also considered selling my property and moving to a smaller apartment to save more money. I still have a lot of work to do. Repairing my relationship with my son will not be an easy process. Even though he is glad to be with me, he continues to inquire about his father and grandparents, and I am at a loss for words. He's told me a few things about them, such as how he spent the majority of his time with his grandparents and how his father and my in-laws were only available for a portion of the day. When I ask him how it was living with his grandparents, he makes a face and says it wasn't very good since everyone was continuously fighting. I completely get that. It sounds like they treated him poorly because they refused to accept responsibility. I can't comprehend why they treat a youngster that way, but I wouldn't put it past them. They are undoubtedly capable of making even a young child feel horrible about himself. But I don't have to worry about it anymore because he's with me. Update 3. Hello everyone. I can't believe I've returned here after nearly 5 years. My life is so different right now that it feels unreal. 5 years is a long time, and a lot has changed. The first being my son's age. We have a wonderful connection right now, and after many therapy sessions, he and I have finally become the mother and son we should have been from the start. He's growing into a wonderful man, and I'm confident he'll be nothing like his father. I simply know it in my heart. He's 9 years old and already a wonderful gentleman. I'm parenting him on my own, and I have full custody because James gave up and moved to Europe after getting out of jail. I cannot say I am surprised. He left with his coworker, who he had been cheating on me with, and they are now married. I guess he merely replaced his biological son with another child. It's terrifying, but that's the type of person he is. My parents and my brother were released from jail after 6 months of good behavior. We haven't communicated, and they didn't try to contact me when they were freed, which I appreciate because I doubt I would have had much to say to them anyway. I have no news regarding my in-laws. I haven't heard from them in years, and that's for the best. I believe I am living a life now. God has blessed me with a solid job and a consistent salary. I'm still working at the company I started with my friend's business, and it's doing pretty well. So life worked out beautifully for me and my son, and it was more than I could have hoped for. I am very appreciative of everything